We've had a chance to sample a couple of interesting perspectives directly and indirectly related to intellectual property. As I mentioned at the beginning, we've launched this inaugural DC IP Forum to have those types of conversations. So nothing's out of bounds here for us, even if there are challenges and questions about the value of the patent system and participating in it versus things like open source. I want to talk for a second about how intellectual property is driving our economy. For most companies, even those who participate in open source-based software, patents are the most valuable assets in almost any business. Beyond just the revenue and profit, one of the key items that plays a role in the valuation of any company is the intellectual property assets. Most smaller companies don't IPO, they're acquired. So in the evaluation of the value of the company, patents are one of the first things that's identified as contributing to that value. What's the reason? Patents provide for exclusive rights. They can keep others out of your territory. Who wouldn't want a monopoly if you can have it? The key is it's for a limited amount of time. So the more use you can make of it in that time, the better. Oh, patents definitely, and trademarks and copyrights, but patents definitely across any industry impact our economy, cause growth, provide for stimulation of next generation innovation. This year alone, we will see over 500,000 new patent applications filed in the United States. Our system is robustly used by not just U.S. applicants, but almost half come from outside the United States. The U.S. patent system affects the global economy, not just our U.S. economy. There's definitely growth. We've seen also trends that are showing more patents issuing this year than in any other year, up about 5%. We're expecting to see about 330,000 patents issue in the US this year. Patent activity always is a leading indicator. It's a leading indicator in business because you have to file patents before you can have commercial activity. So if you look at patent data, you should see indications of intention for commercial activity. And when you combine the two, that's where you see confirmation of value in a given area. You can see why I love patent data. Another thing to think about in terms of markets and what's happening is to look at trends, not just over the long term, but in the more recent term as well. Let's talk a little bit about patent data. So if we look at edge computing and patent data, we see growth in that area up over 310% in the last 5 years in terms of patents filed and issued in the US. Already, we've seen more than 200% increase in applications in the last 2 years compared to the prior 2 years in edge computing. We heard just a few minutes ago about the importance of being able to do processing of data nearer to the source. The more IoT or Internet of Things proliferates, the more we'll need to have those solutions. So it's no surprise then, perhaps, to see the investment there. The technology categories covered by that in edge computing include communications and blockchain and non-blockchain platforms. Let's talk about who's investing in those areas in patents. Well, we know Red Hat, as we mentioned earlier, is an open source software platform. Red Hat is the #1 patent leader in edge computing patent applications and issuance. Well, we know there was a recent acquisition of Red Hat, don't we? There's confirmation of value. IBM merging, acquisition merging. IBM was 6th in that sector. So combining 1 and 2, wow, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Look at Cisco, Itron. Itron's very active in the electric power grid, the top company in demand response or controlling how we manage power to ensure that it's there. Edge computing is important there. We're trying to have more smart devices and smart meters to govern the electric power grid so that we don't have to call the utility to let them know the power's out, right? We want to smarten everything up. Intel, Akamai, Huawei, AT&T, these round out the top 10 in edge computing. Oh, there's one I forgot. A company called Limelight. How many of you know Limelight? They're projected to do over $51 million. Sounds small relative to those big guys I just talked about. But they pivoted their business into edge computing. They had been offering edge cloud as a service most recently. They used to be content delivery, video, gaming on demand. So what are they doing in edge computing? They've learned from that prior application, there's more value to their business in edge computing and offering infrastructure as a service. You've heard of software as a service, pay for it as you use it, as you need it. But now infrastructure, IT as a service. That's attractive to large companies like Red Hat and smaller companies. We work with a client, EdgeX, that focuses on infrastructure as a service as well, on a blockchain-based platform. Most of Intel's investment in patents in the edge computing area that we've seen is recent. Most of their activity here has been in the past 2 years. So that's more than just the high-level numbers. The number of patents matters, but over time, what's the investment and participation by a company? One of the things that we notice, and I've had a lot of inquiry about, is whether companies are buying versus building. How do you know who's ready to buy versus build in the patent space? It depends on what you already have and what you don't have, right? So how do you identify companies as an investor that are very likely to be acquired by those buyers? You fill the gaps. So identifying gaps in patent data within any given sector can be a key to identification of future partnerships, licenses, and merger and acquisition activity. And as we started at the beginning of this closing speech, we learned that that's where the valuation numbers are as well. So we're finding that investors are increasingly interested in patent data, not just operating companies. Let's talk about another area that's really interesting, AI, artificial intelligence. Just a small show of hands, how many of you have heard of AI? How many of you believe you have AI affecting your life right now? The same, it's everyone for sure. AI is fabulous because I think it brings both optimism and concern. Some of the concerns that we've heard expressed is that while AI holds promise to improve our economy, to increase our efficiency, there's concern about elimination of jobs. There's a concern about elimination of a need for people. I've even heard it might eliminate patent attorneys. We're not worried about that. Actually, not yet. One of the things that's unique about AI and its application is solving problems that is just not possible for us to do at the scale that we've done it before. As we've moved to cryptocurrency, as we've moved to electronic banking, there's a need for AI to help manage the cybersecurity. So AI and cybersecurity is another one of those areas that we see trends in patents that's beyond just the trend of increase in overall filings. And that's AI cybersecurity up over 300% also in the last 5 years. Other areas where AI is being applied in smart vehicles, we see an increase there, for example, in the specific area of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs or drones, over 750% increase in patent applications and issuances in the US in the last 5 years. AI plays a big role in those filings. We see that Gartner forecasts over $165 billion being invested in AI just by 2023. When we look at the most recent trends with patent data, we're getting confirmation of that. In fact, we think it might be even higher. There's a more than 200% increase in patent filings in AI in cybersecurity in just the last 2 years. That's significant. If we think about some of the other items mentioned today, there's even more promise: quantum computing. That can be accelerating AI, applications of AI. IBM and Google often stand at the top of quantum computing, but when we look at the patent position, it's IBM that's at the top. Google is only rounding out the top 10, and the difference is significant. IBM holds more than 7 times the patent position that Google does in that area. What does that suggest? Not necessarily that they're behind, but they're behind in patents. So there's probably going to be acquisitions that we see from the Google and quantum computing perspective. Another company that's interesting, D-Wave, is in the top 10 there in AI for cybersecurity. Again, a private company. They have over 75 million in contracts, so it's really small by comparison to the large entities. They're doing quantum cloud. It's the next blockchain, right? We'll just put quantum in front of anything. But I see government and national security as an application, as an issue. That's one of the reasons that we're doing this DCIP forum, is not only to talk about the technology, not only to talk about the regulation, but to talk about the importance of what we see based on patent data. We can have opinions about it. We can see market trends. But again, the investment in patents is going to be the leading indicator of what's to come. So it's important that we have a voice here in our nation's capital. It's important that we have a voice from everyone who's participating today and from those of you who couldn't make it here but may participate online. We also think about medical applications of AI, biomedical. Imaging analysis has advanced significantly and more quickly because of the application of AI. And yet there's a lot of data moving there. That's a combination area for edge computing and AI cybersecurity. So these two patent areas that seem unrelated actually overlap quite a lot. Some of the same companies in edge computing are very active in AI. We expect to see that trend continue as well. Recently, in fact, just yesterday, most recently, I've been participating in some conversations on Capitol Hill. What we're trying to do is provide data and information to inform decision-making, to inform the formation of legislation that will regulate and govern what's happening in some of these areas. There's been a lot of changes just in patent laws and regulation. There's legislation that's currently being proposed called the Stronger Patent Act. There has been prior legislation that has not gone into law, like the Innovation Act. Sometimes the names can be a little bit deceiving. The Innovation Act, for example, was purported to promote innovation, but the goal of it was actually to reduce the ability of patent owners to enforce rights if they were not operating companies. So we're glad to see that that one didn't go into effect. One large piece of legislation that was enacted was named the America Invents Act. It went into full force and effect in 2013. One of the issues that we've seen from that, in the wake of that, if you will, is that it had an effect on the value of intellectual property, of patents in particular. It increased the ability to challenge patents after they're issued. Once a patent has been granted, it's presumed valid. There is a presumption of validity. And that's important because the reason the US patent system is so strong, so robust, and so long-standing, more than any other one in the world, is because there's a reasonable business certainty in our patent system. There's a level of predictability. There's a consistency of value to anyone who owns the patent rights, regardless of whether they are a large company, a small company, an independent inventor, or a company, entity, an LLC, if you will, that owns patents but doesn't actually make, use, or sell anything. That's never been a requirement in our country. It's important that patent owners have the ability to freely transfer the assets that they've created in patents. So we don't want to have any legislation that would have a chilling effect on that. That will depress the value of patents. It will create uncertainty. It will restrict the ability for inventors to specialize in their area, not having to make, create, use, or sell the invention, but to be able to invent it, to provide that solution, to disclose it publicly, and then get a return on that investment to create wealth. But if an inventor can't sell their patent to a third party, that's not going to be a great incentive to continue to invest what's required to invent. One of the things about the stronger Patent Act that we think is helpful is that it would limit the IPR, the inter partes review, the post-grant challenge, so that it can't be done over and over and over again. That's one of the concerns and complaints that we've seen from patent owners, is that if they have to enforce their patent in order to obtain a license, to get a return on that investment, they can be challenged and perhaps should be. But it shouldn't be a regular, ongoing thing from the same petitioner, from the same company, the same defendant. So we think that that's a beneficial part of the Stronger Patent Act, to stop endless IPRs, and perhaps even to raise the burden of evidentiary proof from preponderance of the evidence to clear and convincing. After all, if we're presuming a patent is valid, it should be a greater burden to undo that. Of course, we have to ensure that quality of patents that are exiting the patent office is high, that patents are presumed valid because they should be presumed valid. It's a difficult challenge. As a former examiner, I know that there's a lot of time and energy that's spent into reading patents that are prior art and comparing and determining if something should actually be granted as a patent, if claims should be allowed. Most examiners have a great pressure to do that in a very short amount of time. What's happening every day? The number of patents being filed are increasing. There's more data. AI can be a helpful solution. It can help examiners. So we hope that we'll see software innovation inside the patent office, investment in improved quality, investment in systems. So we would obviously encourage our Congress to consider not taking U.S. patent and trademark application, examination, and search fees from the patent office, but allowing that revenue to stay. The patent office is actually one of the only agencies, if not the only one in our government, that makes money. Hallelujah. That means it's really helping the economy. It's working. But it's not working well. We're really bankrupting it if we allow Congress to continually reappropriate that funding that should be used to examine the patents that have been filed, that are waiting in line. We've seen that already with Social Security, right? We want to not bankrupt the patent system. We need to invest in technology and innovation to make patents not only high quality and valuable, but predictable. What is owning a patent? It's a right to exclude. As long as our markets are robust and the courts are predictably allowing people to enforce them, there will continue to be investment both from within the United States and outside into our patent system. That's pretty exciting. We think the current director has been doing a good job to improve guidance and guidelines and training for patent examiners, and we'd like to see that continue. So part of what we're doing with this DCIP forum today is kicking off the invitation to you, to people throughout the United States who care about our economy, who care about innovation, and who participate as practitioners and applicants and owners in the patent system, to engage in this dialogue with Congress, to engage in dialogue with each other, to ensure that we continue to lead in the world in innovation, in economic impact. That's part of our goal here. So let's think about looking forward as I've asked that question of others. There's a lot of possibility. One of the reasons I enjoy patents so much is it's the one truly unlimited resource we have. It's ideas. It's imagination, and that can't be fully replaced by AI. What an amazing resource that we have, a human resource, invention, innovation. So we'd like to see the patent system remain robust. If we look at globally, one World Economic Forum statistic is that for kids who are currently in elementary school today, 65% of the jobs that currently exist will not exist for them. What will they do? They'll invent new jobs. We'll create new jobs. Innovation is a solution. One such new position I'll suggest is a data translator. As we've learned this afternoon, there are numbers and then there's the story behind the numbers. What does it really mean? What's the insight there? Part of being able to tell the story is knowing the history, not just the trends. Understanding the technology and the data. Obviously, data science is a huge area as well. We will manage and lead and create through innovation. So I'm optimistic. My kids are a little bit older, but they certainly have heard their share about patents, as you can imagine. What can you do? Use your voice, participate, engage, explore. What is trending in your area of interest? Every one of you, each and every one is impacted by technology in one way or another, from healthcare to communications to even your personal investment information. So I encourage everyone to explore patent data. Explore what's happening in your area. Maybe just start with a very narrow focus. One of the things we know about patent data is there's people behind it. Our US law requires that a human person be named as an inventor. It's the one job that we will always have. We will be able to invent. So I invite you and encourage you to please continue, submit feedback, submit ideas, areas of interest that you'd like us to cover in this DCIP forum as we move ahead. We'll try to keep you informed, but keep the conversation two-way. Thank you so much for your time today. Have a good afternoon.